What's up, guys? It is the Coaster Battleman here, bringing you my overall analysis on the new for 2019 B&M dive coaster, Yukon Striker. It will be the new ride at Canada's Wonderland next year, and this looks to be a very nice addition for Canada's Wonderland. And I've heard some negatives on this ride already and some positives, and I'm going to go over the ride and the layout and the stats and things like that and my overall thoughts on it with the positives and negatives. And let's get started. So this coaster is the same height as Valraven, but the drop is actually larger. It's going to be a 245-foot drop. The top speed of this ride will be 80 miles per hour. That's the same speed as Diamondback. Very fast ride indeed. Definitely one of the few coasters out there with an 80 mile per hour speed. And this looks to be a very cool ride. And this first drop is definitely looking like a very awesome part of the ride. You're diving into the water, basically, is kind of like what this is here. And in looking through, I'm going to lower the speed here. Like this coaster, you dive right through a tunnel and into a dive, not a dive loop, an Immelman. Pretty nice inversion there. It definitely looks like a very fun element. Next up, you have a 0G roll, which is a very nice inversion. Pretty similar to what Valraven has as its final inversion after the dive loop. It has one of these. And then we have a vertical loop. And a lot of coaster enthusiasts are pretty skeptical about this element, but in my opinion, I think it looks like a pretty fun element. And we're going into a dive loop here, very nice. And after this, the ride kind of seems to slow down after those 4 inversions. And I slowed down time to talk about the inversions a little bit. And I know the vertical loop, pretty controversial inversion for the dive coaster, but I think it will be a pretty cool element and definitely a very unique one for a dive coaster. And after that, we go into this drop here. A similar ending to Gatekeeper at Cedar Point, where after all the awesome inversions, you just go through kind of a small little helix and airtime hill, and then the ride's over. It kind of reminds me of Gatekeeper in some ways, and Valraven, because it's 8 people across, and 8 people across with vest restraints. It's the same size trains as Griffin, which can fit 10 people per row. And I really like how Griffin, they don't really need the vest restraints in my opinion. I feel like the over-the-shoulder restraints are better for the airtime. Looking back at Griffin, I got some pretty nice airtime on the drop. So overall, I feel like over-the-shoulder restraints, you could increase the capacity by 6 extra people per train. Plus, you get better airtime. Like, in my opinion, over-the-shoulder restraints should have been the better option. But I know with Yukon Striker, there are some negatives, but there's some pretty good positives to it. I know the length of this ride, even though it's short, it's much better than the average dive coaster. Like, these other massive dive coasters, Griffin and Sheikra, they have like 1 or 2 inversions, despite being super massive. They actually have really good drops and water splashdowns. But the Cedar Fair B&M dive coasters now, with Yukon Striker and Valraven, they focus more on the inversions than the other dive coasters in the country, which is some in North America. So, in my opinion, I feel like this dive coaster, Yukon Striker, will easily be the 3rd best coaster at Canada's Wonderland, easily beating out Vortex as their 3rd best ride, 3rd best roller coaster, and Canada's Wonderland now has a super tall big three with Leviathan, Behemoth, and Yukon Striker. That's a very nice top three to have. And with Yukon Striker, the inversions look. That section looks like the best part of the ride for me. It's like back to back to back to back inversions, and you're just flying through them. And after that, the ride just kind of ends basically with the little helix and brakes. It's kind of a small drop. I don't really like this part of the ride. It'd be nice if they added a few extra elements like some more bank turns or something like that. Or if they kind of split the inversions, but I really like how it is back to back to back with the inversions. And I know the vertical loop on this coaster looks like a pretty unique element, like I said, and I think there is definitely some really good potential with that inversion and the layout. There's definitely tons of potential for future dive coasters. Will they have kind of a layout like this? But this coaster will have beaten Valraven's record when it opens of 4 inversions, the largest drop on a dive coaster, the longest dive coaster, and it still feels pretty short. And now let's go to Yukon, the logo of Yukon Striker, and in my opinion, this is a pretty nice looking logo. You have the mountains and the wilderness in the background with the huge bird. The Yukon Striker font looks very nice. This is just such a clean logo, like really nice. Cedar Fair does some awesome logos. Fury 325, Banshee, like they've had a lot of really good recent ones. Valraven had a great logo. Mystic Timbers, like these rides have had great logos. And Yukon Striker looks like one of the coolest roller coaster logos I've seen. And I really like that bird in front of the mountains. Like, I actually really like the name Yukon Striker. Some people are saying it's kind of weird, but in my opinion, I think it's a pretty decent name. And this dive coaster, in my mind, as long as it's glossy smooth, will be the best dive coaster in the world. And Valraven definitely disappointed me. It seemed to get rougher over the years. Like 2016, I had my best rides on it. 2017, it seemed to get a bit shakier. Then 2018, I've had my worst rides on it. And it's still a solid ride, but as long as Yukon Striker doesn't suffer from the same fate, then I feel like it will easily be the best dive coaster on the planet for years to come, unless Cedar Fair or somewhere else in the world builds another dive coaster with like maybe even 5 inversions or the first Giga dive coaster, something like along those lines. But this ride, it looks massive. And Cedar Fair, they've been working with B&M. It's been a few years, but I'm really happy they are working with B&M again. It's really nice to see a new B&M in North America with this dive coaster. So Yukon Striker definitely is going to make a huge impact on Canada, Canada's Wonderland, and the entire continent of North America. I feel like this coaster will make a very big impact, especially on the general public, with the crazy inversions and the huge drop and the insane height of this ride. But after Canada's Wonderland's Big 3, Vortex is like the only other solid coaster, and then the rest of their rides are just kind of eh. So it's nice for Canada's Wonderland. They now have a Big 3 to compete with Carowinds. Well, sort of. With Leviathan, Behemoth, and Yukon Striker. That's going to be a nice rivalry. And then I know Carowinds, they're getting a Mack coaster in 2019. And it's going to be a fantastic addition. We haven't seen any other announcements from Cedar Fair yet, except for Worlds of Fun, but I will cover that in my full analysis of all the Cedar Fair parks and what they will be getting in 2019. And that's all for this video, guys. And I thank Canada's Wonderland for making this POV. 223 feet in the air, 90-degree drop, 245-foot drop. The inversions look really good. This is just a pretty solid coaster. I feel like it will be like the third best coaster at Canada's Wonderland, and definitely something they needed. So thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay tuned for more videos.